The holiday of Shavuot, I'll tell you a word from Rabbi Schiller, the Rosh Hashiva here. He told this to me 5 years ago. That's before I joined the staff. So I'm not telling you this because I need to get some points by him. But I think it's very important for people to realize and understand the concept which we're going to talk about. But before I get to what Rabbi Schiller had to say, the Gemara says in many places that on a holiday you can decide how to spend the holiday. You can either spend the holiday studying, praying, spiritually the whole day, or if you want to spend the holiday eating, drinking, and being merry, right, having a good steak. Nowadays it's probably, what are these things called with the fish, the raw fish?
Sushi.
Sushi, right? No, it's sushi. I don't know exactly what's the newest fad of something which is very tasty. So you can spend the whole day either spiritually, or you can spend the whole day having physical pleasures. But there's one holiday that you have to split. Half the day spiritually, and half the day with physical pleasures. So now, if I would tell you, that, let's say on Pesach, Passover, that on Passover, you can spend the whole day learning and davening. Would you be happy about that? Maybe, maybe not. Why? It's a spiritual holiday. Okay. We got out of Egypt. But I think there would be some place for physical enjoyment also. The Seder, other things which we have. But there's one holiday that you cannot spend the whole day in spiritual meditation, but you have to have a good time, enjoy yourself, whatever you like best, whether it's meat, whether you like a fine wine, or Rabbi Schiller, a good scotch. You have to enjoy yourself on this holiday. Which is this holiday which you have to spend half the day having a good time? Shavuot. Did anybody tell you that? She did? No? Okay. Half a day Shavuot. So the question is, why is it that Shavuot is a holiday that you have to enjoy yourself, and you're not allowed to spend the day in spiritual meditation, in studying, in praying, but you have to leave the Beis Medrash, you have to leave the synagogue, and have a good time. Why would you say that's true? Does anybody want to make a guess, conjecture? Why do you have to have a good time?
We're happy that we received the Torah.
True, but we're happy we went out of Egypt. No, I think we're probably happier that we left the servitude in Egypt than getting the Torah, even though it's nice. But why does that, anybody else? Yeah, what do you say?
Because the Torah talks about existence in the physical world. So you have to, just as you receive the Torah, you need to practice.
Very good. So you want to say that just as the Torah relates to the physical world, therefore you have to do something about the physical world, have to relate to the physical world on the Chag of Shavuot. Now, what I'm going to tell you now is a little bit of an extension. What's your first name? Isaac. It's a little bit of an extension of what Isaac said, but it's a very, very important principle which it's important for all of us to know this before we get to the Chag HaShavuot. I was brought up in Detroit. Anybody know Detroit around here? What? Detroiters? No Detroiters to that. I was just in Detroit. We have a evening of elevation, spiritual guidance, whatever. So about 350 people showed up in Detroit, which was a nice crowd for Detroit. And when I was brought up in Detroit, Detroit had the religious area, which is called Oak Park, and the rich area, which is called Birmingham Hills. So a house in Oak Park cost $150,000 to $200,000, which is not bad. And in Birmingham Hills, it used to cost $1 million, $1.5 million, a real mansion. So I was visiting a friend of mine who married a girl from Birmingham Hills. And she was living in one of these smaller Oak Park houses. So if you had one of these houses here in Israel, it wouldn't be so bad. But over there in Oak Park, it was like second-rate housing. And I asked his wife, who was a Balat Tshuva, she had been not religious, she became religious, does she feel a little bit like a downgrade from where she was over there in Birmingham Hills, here in Oak Park? So she told me these words, and I'll never forget what she said. Over there, it's a spiritual slum, right? Birmingham Hills might be physically nicer, but it's a spiritual slum. So I'll first explain this a little bit more, and then we'll see what the implications are. The Torah was not given to us just to relate to God. It's important to relate to God. It's nice to relate to God. But the Torah was given to us in order to know how to live our lives in this world and get the maximum amount of benefit and the maximum amount of pleasure from this physical world. Why is that? Because a person, in order for him to be able to enjoy life, in order for a person to feel accomplishments in life, in order for a person to be able to get real richness out of his life, he has to have a proper balance. If there's no balance in life, then there's no enjoyability in life. As I told you, I came from West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield is not as fancy as Birmingham Hills, but it's also not bad. So I was in yeshiva for a number of years. When I came back, I asked about all my friends, neighbors which lived in that area. So my sister told me, they got divorced, he committed suicide, they moved out of here many years ago. There was practically not one person left that I know, except for one person is a single mother who had one girl and 10 cats. And she was our next door neighbor. She had a big yard, and all my grandchildren could play in her yard because the 10 cats didn't bother them and the one child didn't matter. I came back to Oak Park after so many years, and I see this guy has a big family, and the family is enjoying themselves, and he has this one come for this yontif and that one for that yontif. And you see the flourishing community. I could walk in the streets and say, oh, this is this guy's grandson, this is this guy's granddaughter, you know, the little faces of the grandchildren. And I saw how they developed, how the community developed. So who enjoyed life more? My friends in West Bloomfield or my Torah associates in Oak Park? So the idea of the Torah and the concept of giving the Torah is a concept not just to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but how to get the maximum out of the physical life which we have in this world. Therefore, the Torah tells us, the Gemara tells us, Hakol modim debi'inan nami lochem ba'atzeres. Everybody agrees that on Shavuot you have to also enjoy the holiday physically. Because if you don't enjoy the holiday physically, you're missing out on the point of the holiday. The point of the holiday is how to get the proper balance between the physical world and the spiritual world, and that's why the Torah was given, and therefore you have to know how to enjoy yourself. We have a principle in general, that even when you learn Torah, when you're in the base of Medrash, you have to enjoy the learning that you have. When do you know that you're learning properly? When you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, something's wrong, you're not doing it right. So like a friend of mine, I went to camp with a guy from Toledo, Margolis. So we went to camp out in the mountains, and the first day he walked into camp, he was miserable. Couldn't stand camp. And the whole time he was telling me this is no good and that's no good and everything. And I had a miserable time that camp. Why? Because this guy was telling me it's miserable, so I became miserable. I camped swimming and canoeing and hiking and all kinds of things. But you can be miserable even in good things if you don't know how to enjoy it. You don't know how to relate to it. At any rate, this is the first principle which we have to understand. We're coming towards the Chag of Shavuot. The Chag of Shavuot is the accepting of the Torah. The accepting of the Torah is not just getting laws and regulations and study from God, but it's a way to be able to get the proper balance and the proper enjoyment out of this world, out of this life. Now over here, I want to point out also a very interesting thing. I would call Shavuot the Chag of Balei Tshuva. Why would I call Shavuot the Chag of Balei Tshuva? Balei Tshuva, whatever, people coming back. And this is for an interesting reason. We all know that David HaMelech, David, the king of Israel, the greatest king of all time, the forefather of the Messiah, he was probably, after the forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, he was the greatest Torah personality, Moshe Rabbeinu, any one of the greatest Torah personalities. He was born on Shavuos, and he died on Shavuos. So, okay, that's the reason we read Megillat Rus. We read on Shavuos a part of the Tanakh which talks about how David HaMelech was brought into the Jewish people, how his grandmother was brought into the Jewish people, whatever. But why is it that Shavuos happens to have David HaMelech's birth and death on Shavuos? So there's a sefer called Pri Tzadik. Pri Tzadik is a sefer which is written by Reb Tzadok Kohen, and it's very deep sefer, has a lot of very philosophical and Kabbalistic concepts which are very appropriate for this generation. There's a rabbi of Moshe Shapiro, his name is, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he used to teach here in Or Samech, I think he still gives some shiurim. He's a tremendous philosopher, and the lectures which he gives are very deep and very appropriate for everyday life. So I'm a bit jealous of him. He says such great shiurim, I'd like to do the same thing myself. So I decided I have to look up the source material that he has in order to maybe to find out why he says such great shiurim. So I spent about 2,000 shekel, a few weeks away, to buy all the books which are source material possibly for his shiurim. And one of these books is called Tzidkas HaTzadik, and there he talks about a very interesting thing. He talks about the fact that we have a conflict between Kabbalah, meaning that which we receive, like this is the law, this is how you have to act, this is what you're supposed to do, the precepts that are given to us, and Seichel, our understanding. Which is more important? Accepting the principles which were given to us from our rabbis, or understanding things ourselves? This is a loaded question. What do you say? What is more important? Understanding something yourself, or accepting the principles which our rabbis gave us once upon a time?
You don't understand it yourself, it's just blind faith.
What?
You don't understand it yourself, it's just blind faith, you're just accepting everything.
That's true, absolutely. So which is more important? Blind, what?
You need a little bit of both.
That is the correct answer. You have to know how to synthesize understanding and the precepts which have been taught to us and been given to us literally by God himself. On Har Sinai, when the Torah was given, God came to the Jewish people, God came to Moses and explained to them the principles of the world and different edicts which they have to follow. This is what is called Kabbalah. But if you only have a Kabbalah, blind faith, you don't know what you're doing. And the Jewish people are very much against that. The Jewish people understand that you have to understand what you're doing, otherwise it's only parroting, it's not really serving God. But it was more than that, and this is the Chiddush of the Pri Tzadik, which is more important, the Kabbalah or the understanding? The acceptance of previous principles or understanding, which takes precedent?
Accept.
What?
Accept.
So everybody would say acceptance, and he says no, understanding takes precedence. Now this is a very tricky thing, but it's important for us to understand, and this is also one of the principles which we have in Or Samech. We don't want you to accept something because we told you so. We want you to accept something because you realize that this is the right thing to do. How do we see this? So the Pri Tzaddik says there are two parts of the Torah. There is Torah shebichtav, the written Torah which we have, and there is Torah shebal peh, which is the oral law. And there are two major figures which represent these two concepts. Moses is the one that gave the written law. Rabbi Akiva, have you ever heard of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva was the rabbi with the 24,000 Talmidim that died, and that's why we can't take haircuts and sing on during the Sfiras Omer. Rabbi Akiva was considered the father of Torah Shebal Peh. Now, Rabbi Akiva came from Geirim, from proselytes. What is the word? Somebody that, what? Converts. From converts. That's the best word. They came from converts. So the Pri Tzaddik says the father of Torah Shebal Peh came from a convert. The father of Torah Shebichtav, Moshe Rabbeinu, received the Torah from heaven. The way to have a complete Torah is when we use the Torah of Rabbi Akiva, when we use our mind to understand what we're doing, then it's possible to understand and appreciate the Torah which was given to us by Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, before we come to Shavuot, first we have Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the holiday of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva's input into the Torah became part of our heritage. And this heritage, together with the Torah which was given on Sinai, these two things have to be unified, have to be made one, and then we have a true Kabbalah Torah. That's what Kabbalah Torah is all about. So therefore, what I'm saying to a certain extent is we have a certain parallelism. A parallelism between the fact that you have to have a physical enjoyment, the physical world has to be part of the Torah, part of the acceptance of the Torah. Our mind and our understanding has to be part of the acceptance of the Torah. But this all has to be done in a manner where we have a commitment to really try to do and understand the Torah properly. Because it's very easy to learn something superficially and say, this doesn't make any sense, and I can't relate to this, and this is too difficult. I was once, I don't know if I should say this, I was once teaching somebody who wanted to become a Baal Tshuva. He was getting married, and they asked me to teach the Torah laws before he got married. So I just talked about Shabbos, fine. I talked about brachas, fine. Then I started talking about the fact that there's such a thing as taras hamishpacha. There's certain times that you can be with your wife, certain times you have to separate from your wife. So he told me, Rabbi, that's hitting below the belt. Right? That's too difficult for me to do. All right. When he gets older and he realizes what married life is all about, he'll find out that it's a tremendous big bone to a good marital relationship, but he wasn't in that stage yet. He was still a chos and he didn't know what it's all about. At any rate, but the idea is that the Torah gives us the proper balance between these two things. Now, on Shavuot, this coming holiday, so there's a custom to stay up all night. Now, why do we stay up all night? So I'm going to tell you in short, which should really take much longer, but I don't want to spend this much time. On the day of Shavuot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides on each individual how much he's going to be able to understand and relate to the Torah. Everybody tries to do the right thing, but we've often tried to do the right thing and we weren't successful. I've been trying to be on a diet. It works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work. A guy offered me $10,000 to lose 30 pounds for my yeshiva. Lost 30 pounds. Well, I've gained back since then. But I had a 6-month. I had to hold on to it for 6 months, and then I was able to 5 years ago. Anyway, when I had the incentive of $10,000, every piece of cake was $1 for me. Right? Every piece of kugel was $100. So I didn't eat. Well, I had to do a diet, but anyway, and I lost all the 30 pounds within 6 months, and I kept it off for 3 or 4 years after that. So you have to have the right incentive, and you have to be able to have what is called siyata d'shmaya. You have to be able to have the proper help from heaven to be able to enable you to overcome the difficulties. So people might want to do something. People might want to understand and appreciate that this is something I might want to do, I might want to investigate. But it's too hard. I have things which are going to keep me from doing it. I have to get to work, back to work. I have to make a living. I have to go back to college, whatever. But on Shavuos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at each individual and says, you prepared yourself for Shavuos. You're interested in knowing about my Torah. I will give you the help to get a certain percentage of it, a certain understanding. And over here, I brought you the Sefer. This Sefer is called Shnei Luchos Habris. Shnei Luchos Habris was written by Rabbi Yeshaya Halevi Horowitz. He lived about 300 years ago. And I don't know if you know that before Rosh Chodesh now, 2 days ago, everybody prayed a special prayer for his children and his grandchildren, that they should all be healthy and they should all keep the Torah. And he was the one that composed this prayer. And in fact, today, whenever you see a Horowitz, you know his name is Halevi Horowitz, and he's a grandchild of the Shalah, and the Shalah has thousands and thousands of descendants which keep different customs because they're the grandchildren of the Shalah. His praying for his children worked, and it kept going from generation to generation for many years, 300 years already. At any rate, he writes that on Shavuos at night, that's the evening to get help in keeping Torah and understanding Torah. And for this reason, he says, I want to tell you a story. This is a very famous story. I'll tell it to you in short, but you should know it happened only 400 years ago. 300 years ago, he testified on it, and it's been something which is known to be by the famous rabbis in the last few hundred years. The Shulchan Aruch was written by Rav Yosef Cairo, rabbi that lived in Spain, Portugal, and he was in Istanbul, right, Istanbul. What? So he was living in Istanbul. He keeps on changing names. So he was there in Istanbul, and he came Shavuos at night, and he came together with a few of his fellow rabbis, and they started learning. And they were learning with his slavus, and they were saying everything with their whole heart. And about 3 hours after they started learning, suddenly the Beis Yosef hears a voice. And the voice says, God, Kadosh Baruch Hu in heaven, sees how you're committed and decided to keep the Torah this evening. And God loves your learning. And because He loves your learning so much, He wants to teach you things that you would ordinarily not understand. He wants to give you help to understand more and more of the precepts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and learn this way, and everything's going to be tremendous this year. But you should know, and in those days, by the way, this interesting thing, nowadays, a lot of people stay up all night Shavuos. When I was a young boy, very few people stayed up all night Shavuos. It's just become, people become more religious lately, and it's a nice custom, cheesecake, stay up all night with black coffee and whatever, they just do it. But in those days, it wasn't a custom which was so accepted. So he said to them, this voice, that if you would have had a minyan learning, it would have been much more. But since you only have 7 or 8 people, so we're going to give you this amount of help. So after they finished the evening, they were all, up in 7th heaven, as we would say, and they decided tomorrow night, the second night of Shavuos in the Chutz La'aretz, the 2 nights, the second night, we're going to get a minyan together. They got a minyan together, and they started learning that night, even more with the dedication. In the middle, the voice started again, and this time he started telling them more things and telling them how great they are and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them. And he says to them, listen, you're here in Istanbul, in Turkey. What are you doing here in Turkey? Go to Eretz Israel. That's the place where you learn Torah. That's the place where you can get the real understanding of Torah. And they learned the whole night through, and they decided they're packing their bags, and they all moved to Tzfas. Have you ever heard of Tzfas? Have you ever been in Tzfas? You know the Arizal? You know all the Mekubalim? The head of that community was the Beis Yosef of Yosef Cairo. Why did he go there? Because of the learning of Leila Shavuos. What was that result? That we have the Shulchan Aruch, we have the Zohar, we have the Kisvei Arizal. All these things came because of the commitment and the help that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to those people that commit themselves at the night of Shavuos. So I want to tell you guys, you have a good year this year. You have Shabbos before, so you can sleep like a narak Shabbos. Not supposed to do it for that condition, but sleep like a, and Shavuos at night. Try to use the evening to learn as much as possible, to commit yourself as much as possible, in order that each one of you should have the siyata d'shmaya, to be able to live a life of Torah, a life of balance, a life of enjoying this world and benefiting in the world to come. And we all should be zoicha to have this benefit for us, Bezrat Hashem.
Amen.